I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook baby.
Yeah, I'm coming down with some kind of nothing, I guess.
I was gonna say AIDS, but I stopped myself.
Oh, thanks, man.
How's it going?
Pretty good, man. How about you?
How's California? Is LA burning?
No, it's actually rebuilding. It's turning to a veritable paradise.
Is it?
No, not yet. Well, so when the Dodgers won the World Series a couple weeks back, some hooligans like lit a bus on fire.
Yeah.
And it just always seems odd to me. Like, why would you tear stuff down and destroy stuff when your team wins?
Yeah.
It just seems like you would be like, hey, let's build a bus, let's build a school, or let's build a hospital.
Yeah, I don't think these are really cut from that crop.
Right.
These aren't engineers and architects.
I would at least try to build something, or at least like, can we at least build some blueprints?
I forgot that the Dodgers won. I guess I was rooting for them. I can't stand the Yankee fans are the worst. Well, no, Philly fans are the worst. Then Yankee fans.
Oh, interesting.
Dodgers aren't great either. There is a noticeable difference. Like I watched a lot of I always watch a lot of baseball. I actually really like baseball, and I do think that the rule change has helped speed the game up. But like, especially in the playoffs, there's a notable difference with the Dodgers. How many people in the stands are just looking at their phones? But like people have like $1,000 tickets behind home plate, more than that, and they're like the Mets played Milwaukee. You didn't see that. The Mets played Phillies. You didn't see that. And then it's like the Dodgers, and everyone's just like looking down at their phone.
Yeah, and because it's a bunch of influencers who are just like,
and celebrities who don't, and that's why I can't stand it. I fucking hate when it's one thing if a celebrity like actually is a fan. Like a lot of celebrities do come from Southern California, and if you move there and you adopt them, you're an actual fan. But it's like when they just start following because their team made the championship. That the most poignant example of this was the Devils in 2012. Here we are, like the New Jersey Devils. We make the Stanley Cup run, the 7th seed, and we play the Kings. And all of a sudden, you had all these celebrities like giving a shit about the Los Angeles Kings and the Stanley Cup when they probably didn't even know the LA had a hockey team before that, and it drove me nuts.
Yeah.
I have that grudge.
My dad hates the Dodgers. It's funny. Like, I just pretend to be a fan of the Dodgers. I don't watch sports that much, so I just pretend to be the Dodgers, just to shine them on. And so now he just equates anything like bad or low quality with the Dodgers. So
he's a Giants fan.
Yeah. And it's funny. This conversation had nothing to do with sports, but so I was texting my dad because my car's hasn't been running very good. Right. So I recently replaced the fuel injectors, but they were not very good quality, and just some no-name brand. And so I texted my dad and I was like, hey, so my car's still not running great. What should I do? And then he goes, I'm gonna order a set of genuine Toyota brand injectors, not cheap Dodger brand ones. And it's like the Dodgers don't make fuel injectors.
Yeah, that's a good dad joke.
Yeah,
you probably found it hilarious.
I thought it was funny. Yeah. So one interesting thing that happened to me this past weekend, I worked the door for a private event at where I work, the venue I work at, and it was another BDSM party event.
You get in there?
Yeah, I was in there.
You get up in there.
I was all up in it, dude.
Just Joe in leather and nipple clamps.
So first off, it was still like pretty R-rated. It was not X-rated. Like there was no full-on nudity and there was no like actual sex. It's more just like. But it was actually more gross than anything. And I'll tell you why.
Hold on, what's not actual sex?
Like penetration and shit. I guess.
So
there's none of that.
Right. So what's between that and not having sex?
Getting spanked.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Like sex like it was like.
All right. Gotcha.
So I saw a fair amount of asses getting spanked, which was not particularly exciting for me. But
doesn't do it for you. Yeah.
But it was also gross because it was because like the whole like BDSM scene, I guess, in LA is very intersectional, And so like there were a lot of it was also like a lot of latex, but it was like full on body latex. And so there were a lot of heavy set men who identified as slender, sexy women. And it's like you cannot pull that off.
I was gonna ask, are any of these people attractive?
Like 90% of them, no, were not. There were a handful of like, okay, she's pretty hot, but you know,
really?
Yeah, there were very
it shocks me that there are any.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And so there's a lot of lube, but again, it was not being used for any like, I'm just serious. Like there were like, you know, like on
Hey, P
tabletops.
Diddy's got a bunch.
I know.
in storage.
They're you know, like
probably trying to offload it.
You know, like what do you call like ashtrays instead of cigarettes or matches. It was just like filled like little packets of lube. But again, it was not used for like sexual reasons. It was used to like make the latex very shiny and glossy. And so, but like people were spilling it. So like I'm slipping around and just like
just Joe on skates, just whoa.
It was a really gross experience because there was like really chubby, ugly people who were all greased up in latex and I'm just like bumping into them and shit. So it was just like it was a pretty gross experience. It was not.
Wait, have you ever seen this total like sidetrack? But do you ever watch Trailer Park Boys?
Oh yeah.
You know Randy?
But was he the sheriff who was always shirtless?
Yeah. Well, he was more of the sheriff's like helper,
right?
Deputy. Yeah, and he was always sure he had a big gut. He was. That's what's so funny about him. He wasn't like a fat guy. Yeah. Like how you would think like fat all over, just like a big gut. And there's this meme I have where he's like standing on a bus with his arm up, like holding on, and a woman sitting there as the bus stops. She like smacks into his stomach. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry there." Oh, sorry about that because it's Canadian. God damn it, Randy! Stop whoring yourself out for cheeseburgers.
I only watched like the first season or two of that, but I really enjoyed it.
Really good show. Really, really good show. It's one of the shows I always want to get back into, and then I watched like the first couple seasons, and then I stop. I should do that over. I love it when they're like going to jail again, and they're like, "I love jail. I'll go back to jail. Like make meals, hang out with my friends. Love jail."
And it's funny because like. When my friends were introducing it to me, like, yeah, there's no like continuity. We just kind of dip into like any episode. They're all pretty self-contained. There's not a whole lot of long.
I'd watch them in order.
Yeah, but like we were just kind of they were just kind of showing me around. It's like because that show's been around for a while. Yeah, but it just seems like even like the later seasons they were still just as funny as like the early ones. Like it was pretty consistently funny.
Wait, so what happened at the Jordan Peterson's an episode?
No, but he said that's his guilty pleasure.
Is it?
Yeah.
Canadians, they stick together.
Yeah.
Wait, so what else happened at the lube party?
That was it. It was pretty much just that.
I see.
Yeah, but it was not a pleasant or arousing experience in any real way.
It's funny because you'd think it'd be like, oh, hell's yeah, it seems like all these like hot dominatrix chicks and like really. Simulating sex and it's just like fat people,
a lot of it,
gross people who are. It's like Louis C.K. does a whole bit about this, or it's also in like a Seinfeld episode. Where like some people are just like too free. I think there's too much for it. It's just like guys in thongs and their gut spilling out. Like if you're gonna do that, at least be hot.
Yeah,
like show off a hot bodied guy or girl, like whatever. Yeah, like be shredded, be sexy, and let it hang out. But if you're like gross, that's like the worst. It's the worst. It's the worst combination.
Yeah, and it was all. And, there were some very elaborate, like they look like big Viking helmets, but like just pure, like big and pointy and elaborate, but just latex, just rubber and latex.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say they're dildos.
No, nothing that it didn't go that extreme, but it was but yeah, and also like it just seemed like everyone was so many people were very self-serious. Like they were just like it's like yeah. I don't know. It wasn't like fun. It's like people were like, I don't know.
You feel guilty about it. That's what these communities should be. You should feel guilty about it, and you do it anyway. Yeah. And then that's back in the day when this stuff was actually transgressive. And now it's like if you can do it in the street. Like I was talking to a friend a few weeks ago, and he was in San Francisco, and the guy, like he said, there's a guy just butt ass naked walking down the street. His dick's just like flopping back and forth, like hitting his. He's big. He's actually like a big like black guy, like big ripped black guy, and his cock's just swinging back and forth.
Jeez.
And it's like, there are children not in San Francisco? Like, do people? I don't. Even you walk outside and you're like, God damn it! Like now I'm not gonna eat this hot dog. Like I don't want this anymore. This vegan hot dog. Like,
I would throw it out, but there are 18 garbage cans, and I don't know. Like I know they're gonna give me a dirty look if I throw it into the wrong one. So, but yeah. Anyway, it was that was an interesting. At the very least, it was interesting. It was a freak show, so it was.
Yeah, it's good people watching, I guess.
Yeah, but it was whatever. So anyway, let's talk culture.
Oh yeah. What do you want to do first?
Let's step into the Tony Hinchcliffe stuff because that's pretty relevant. So leading up to okay, so this is from Variety. Comedian and Kill Tony podcast host Tony Hinchcliffe ignited a national firestorm with his appearance at Donald Trump's October 27th rally at New York City's Madison Square Garden. While endorsing Trump for president via a comedy set, Hinchcliffe made a joke in which he referred to Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. Widespread backlash ensued, with prominent Hollywood figures such as Bad Bunny, Jennifer Lopez, and Aubrey Plaza slamming Hinchcliffe for the racist joke. Hinchcliffe has now debuted the latest episode of Kill Tony, which was recorded right the night after his appearance at the Trump rally amid the height of the backlash against him. He responded amid the joke controversy by admitting that perhaps a Trump rally was not the best venue for this comedy set, although Hinchcliffe was adamant that he will not apologize. Fuck yeah. So let's read the quote here. Last night, I gave a speech. I don't know if you heard about this. It was a speech about free speech, believe it or not. I'm currently under attack. I am the news. I reference Puerto Rico, which currently has a landfill problem in which all their landfills are filled to the brim. I'm the only person who knew about this, unfortunately. With that said, I just want to say that I love Puerto Ricans. They're very smart people. They're smart. They're street smart. They're smart enough to know when they're being used as political fodder. Right now, that is happening. And I apologize to absolutely nobody. Not to the Puerto Ricans, not to the whites. And here's something interesting. So in this article in Variety, not to the Puerto Ricans, not to the whites. So whites is not capitalized, but blacks is capitalized. Palestinians and Jews, those are capitalized. Yeah. Just a weird little editorial thing.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking that because I read that while you were talking, and I think it'd be funny if someone was giving a like a comment like this, and he was like, and you better either capitalize both the W in whites and B in blacks, or lowercase both of them. And then they have to like do and see if they actually go against, because that all came out of 2020 bullshit. That just someplace like Variety. It makes no sense. Yeah, it makes no sense at all. Why those are like, why one white and black would not be the same. Yeah. But it's just something that's carried over in a place like Variety.
Yeah, wasn't it the AP style or whatever? Or like one of those style guys that's kind of like the standard for journalism. Didn't they make that change?
Probably. They suck. Didn't Israel like blow up their building or something? Right? Or was that Al Jazeera? Hold on. Israel bombs AP. Salvage or damage from Israeli. Shocking and horrifying. Israel destroys AP office in Gaza. This was years ago, though. This was like 2020. This wasn't even from October 7th.
Oh, this is just
it's probably because they changed their style, guys.
Stupid rules imposing on us.
I knew it. I'm like, didn't Israel bomb them?
I shouldn't laugh at that, but yeah, it is kind of funny.
I don't think they killed anyone.
Right.
Okay,
like, good.
Fuck you guys.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly.
They might have killed people. I don't know. Anyway, I think this is great.
Yeah.
I like Tony. I think he's very funny.
Yeah.
And
he's a roast comic.
And it was so obvious. Like, hold on. So politically, I do think it was dumb to have him at the like, again, you want to win elections. Trump won, he won by a lot, but like that was dumb. You don't have that at that time, a comic who's known for, like roast comedy, right? Blue comedy, roast comedy. It's just not good politically. That's okay. That doesn't mean it's bad. There are different standards. But at the time, if Trump did lose, and it was because he maybe didn't get the votes from, I'm going to say Latinos here, because people will conflate that, or Puerto Ricans. And, this would be a sticking point. And I'm sure Tony's very happy that didn't happen. And he's right. It's like people are just going to use this. Was this like days before the election, right, or a week before?
Yeah.
For political fodder. It is kind of gross. I do think either side would have done it if they can pounce on it. That's just the nature of the political season, which unfortunately just continues to grow.
Yep.
So I think what's really cool about it also is that Trump won, I think, like the most Puerto Ricans ever. He flipped like a Puerto Rican county of like the most Puerto Rican county in Florida. A lot of people associate Florida, understandably, with Cubans in the South, Venezuelans in the South. There's actually a lot of Puerto Ricans like Central Florida, like Orlando area. So I think he flipped like Osceola County or Osceola or something like that. Puerto Ricans, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, and that's what people are freaking out about. I remember my friends saying that, who lived in like Boyertown, parts of Allentown, like they have a lot of Puerto Ricans up there, and Trump won or did better in like all of those areas, so it didn't affect it. I think it reminded me also of that meme where it has I'm gonna do a verbal meme, Fring from Breaking Bad, where it's like him smiling and him glowering, and it's like white people when you make fun of minorities, and it's like a frown. Or white people when you make fun of white people, a smile. Black is the reverse. When you make fun of white people, they smile. When you make fun of black people, they frown. And then Latinos, it's like when you make fun of white people, they smile. When you make fun of Latinos, they smile. And it's like they're just the best of both worlds. And I think that's what this was. I think people like honestly didn't give a shit as much as like people. I don't think this would have swayed anyone. I don't think there's anyone who's going to vote for Trump who didn't because of this. I mean, maybe it kept some people home, but again, like in the end, it was fine. It didn't change anything. I think he's right to say, like, you guys are just using this politically. People aren't this stupid. There is a legitimate garbage problem where I love on Twitter, it had like all these headlines of Puerto Rico basically is just a giant floating pile of trash right now. That's not necessarily the Puerto Ricans' fault. No, that's not what it's saying, but like it is trash. And I like that he actually associated with that also. I was like, if Kamala won because of this, I would have been like, Jesus, like, can you just there's a little foresight. I feel like you don't. It's one thing to have Trump go on the podcast, which I think is good, and I think helped him a lot, going on Theo Von, going on Rogan. But that doesn't mean you have to have that sort of comedy at your rally, the rally that's like in the arguably the most highly regarded venue in America at Madison Square Garden. So
from what I understand, this was not a Trump approved decision. It was like one of his aides, and they didn't clear it with him. I think it was kind of a last minute thing. And so I think it was just sort of like, hey, let's just look at a list of comedians who are one fairly popular, and two have expressed some kind of support for Trump, or at least have expressed criticism of Kamala Harris. Tony Hinchcliffe was probably like one of like 5 or 10 comedians. Like, Hinchcliffe, let's get him. So he did. So it didn't seem like this was a calculated move on the part of Trump's campaign.
Also, I'm not saying it was, but those people have to, like, I'm not saying Trump knew about this. I'm sure Trump doesn't know who Tony Hinchcliffe is, but the people around him. That's why you keep people around you. You're going to make good decisions. Right.
Another thing too is that when you watch the clip, a fair amount of people in the audience did not laugh, and you also heard some people going, Jesus. There were, it was not like, everybody in the audience was just laughing at the plight of Puerto Ricans. There were a fair amount of people who were like, oh, come on, dude. And another thing too. So Joe Rogan was talking about this because he's friends with Hinchcliffe, and Hinchcliffe does Kill Tony at the Comedy Mothership in Austin, which is Joe Rogan's comedy club. And so Rogan was talking a bit about the backlash and the aftermath of this. So I said, first off, Tony Hinchcliffe is actually very pro recycling. Like, anytime we go to a restaurant or anything, he's always very like, whoa, you got to put that in the recycling, you got to put that in the garbage, you got to put that in compost. So he's very. So it was less about like, hey, I'm just gonna shut on Puerto Ricans, and I'm more making fun of the government's inability to handle waste. So there's that aspect. Another thing too is so Rogan was and a bunch of his comedian friends were in the green room at the Comedy Mothership during election night, and so Rogan was like, yeah, it was such a fun time. Like we're all just like hanging out and drinking and smoking pot and we're just like cheering Trump on, this and that. But the only person who was not really excited, who was actually really nervous, was Tony Hinchcliffe. Was sort of like,
of course.
I hope he wins. I hope I didn't shoot his campaign in the foot.
And not only did he win, he like Latinos were a huge driving force of his win.
Yeah.
And again, not all Latinos are the same, of course not, but you would think that it made, like, I think Trump, it's tough to look at the polls, the exit polls, and it changes over time, but I think he like outright won Latino men and maybe lost by a few points with Latino women. I think it's around 50-50, which is like one of the best a Republican has done.
Yeah.
I mean, he completely flipped counties that went, like, he won Miami-Dade County. Like, that's wild. Hillary won it by 30 points and he won Miami-Dade. So, and also last thing I'll say about Tony is, if you know his background, he's from Ohio. So that's like a big Trump state. And his dad like ran a restaurant. So he was like really against the COVID lockdowns and those sorts of things, like how much that hurt small businesses. His dad had a family run Italian restaurant or something. And so like it was very personal to him. I remember him on a Rogan episode talking about that.
Yeah. So yeah, but I'm glad that Hinchcliffe is not backing down, and good, because this all blew over. So
yeah.
All right. So more celebrity crap. Do you want to talk to Susan Sarandon?
Yeah, sure.
So Susan Sarandon, a great actress and very well known, was it seems like she's been largely canceled by Hollywood for her pro-Palestinian comments. So this is from the Times. Lately, though, Sarandon feels she has been blacklisted in Tinseltown following remarks she made at a pro-Palestinian rally last November. Standing on the back of a lorry at the protest in New York City and apparently speaking off the cuff, she said a lot of people were afraid of being Jewish at this time and are getting a taste of what it feels like to be a Muslim in this country, so often subjected to violence. She quickly apologized, saying that she had intended to express concern over anti-Semitic attacks and made a terrible mistake in the way she phrased it, by implying that until recently, Jews have been strangers to persecution when the opposite is true. The fallout was immediate. I was dropped by my agency. My projects were pulled. She says, I've been used as an example of what not to do if you want to continue to work.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when she tweeted that, and it was pretty fucking stupid. Like, I'm sorry, Muslims just have not gone through a fraction of what Jews have gone through in this country. I'm sure there have been targeted attacks. I'm sure a lot of innocent Muslims were targeted, after 9/11, whether it was like, invective or physical attacks or whatever it was, but it's just not like even really close to the same. And in fact, I would say they're pretty high up there on the oppression pyramid. At this point, and I think that's really stupid. That being said, I've defended Susan Sarandon a lot. So if we were talking about politics, like election politics, and she is, I think, scapegoated for it wasn't like she was a Trump supporter at all. She just didn't support Hillary. She said both parties are corrupt, which is true. And she I think endorsed Jill Stein. And again, it's like, this is 2016, so it's 8 years ago now. But I mean, it's Susan Sarandon. It's not like it was Taylor Swift or someone who was like that pop. So I don't know why. Like, she's a popular actress, but and I never understood why. Maybe she was because she was vocal about it. But here's where my name for today comes from. Gary Johnson Truther, because Hillary lost and Trump won, people just assume, like Ross Perot in the 92 election, that like if all those votes had gone to Bush, or maybe they're split somewhat, I forget what it was, but like there is more evidence to that Ross Perot would take a lot more from Bush because he was like more of a right-wing libertarian than Bush would have won, and we wouldn't have had Clinton. Now, in this case, so you're ascribing all of Jill Stein's votes to Hillary. Fine. If that's how you want to do it, then you have to give Gary Johnson all of his votes to Trump. Gary Johnson was an elected Republican. He was the Republican governor of New Mexico. I'm sure there were some people who, if they had to pick between Hillary and Trump, they would pick Hillary. But if you're going to give all green votes to Hillary, you have to give all libertarian to Trump. If you do that, in fact, I don't argue. It's statistics that Trump not only wins the election, he wins even more states and only expands his lead. And I went through Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and Ohio. Gary Johnson did better than Jill Stein, which means Trump did better than Hillary because Trump won all of those states.
Yep.
And he does better. Then Gary Johnson actually kept Trump from winning 3 other states. New Hampshire, where Trump lost by less than 3,000 votes, right. Minnesota, and Nevada. So if anything, Republicans should have been more pissed. And I didn't give nationally all votes, and I'm sure it won't be very long. Libertarian to Trump and Jill Stein's to Hillary, and who wins the popular vote that way. But that was a big talking point. That, well, unlike this time, Hillary lost the Electoral College, but won the popular vote. That kind of was a big part of this resistance stuff. We actually aren't the minority, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But here, Gary Johnson, and there was no blowback against the libertarians from the Republican Party. Yeah. And I don't know if Jill Stein ever was a Democrat. I'm assuming she was at some point, but I can't imagine she was a Republican. And Gary Johnson was not just a Republican. Oh, and also, if you take Evan McMillan, who, I don't know, do you know who that is?
No.
He was a third-party candidate, ran as an independent. He actually won, I think he's a Mormon. He won 20% of Utah. So Utah's just so right-wing that it didn't matter. Trump still won by 30 points. Yeah. But he also won, where is it? 2% of Minnesota or something. So add those also, because Evan McMillan was also a Republican who was just a never Trump Republican. So he pulled some of that never Trump vote. Right. So it's bullshit. And I feel bad for the left-wing people. And this is why in 2020 you saw Bernie, who was much more tepid with Hillary support, came out so gung-ho for Biden, even though they screwed Bernie twice. Yeah, but the second time he was whatever, I'm not going to be blamed for this one if Trump wins. So he came out so gung-ho for Biden, which is bullshit. They neutered Bernie. I lost a lot of respect for him for that. Yep. Hold on, I'm looking right here. Yeah, so Jill Stein was a Democrat from 1968 to 2002. And Gary Johnson was a Republican, and I think it's bullshit. And I'm a Gary Johnson truther because this comes up all the time. Jill Stein and the Greens, who I don't have, I have some environmentalist views I'm sure we agree on, and some other, maybe some big pharma views and that stuff. Yeah. But in some ways, the Greens are actually kind of like the old Democratic Party in terms of skepticism and anti-corporations and big business and all of that. So there is some overlap there. Sure. But I feel bad for them because they always get scapegoated because the Democrats are just this machine where, if anything, Trump could have won by even more if it wasn't for third parties. Yeah. So that's my rant on. I just hate this. I feel like this is not part of the conversation ever.
Yeah. Well, thanks for talking about that. Yeah, no, but seriously, because I was like Gary Johnson, because in your name there, I was like Gary Johnson. I haven't heard about that guy in quite a while. So
yeah.
But no, and it's funny that Susan Sarandon got caught up in that shit.
Yeah, it's I like Susan Sarandon. I think I like her line Rocky Horror Picture Show. I like her. I always like that movie, The Stepmom. I remember I watched that as a kid, and I remember my now wife was watching on a plane. I forget where we were going, but I was like, "Are you watching The Stepmom?" And I kind of watched it from her screen sometimes. Yeah, I'm like, "Oh, I remember that movie." Or maybe I think I watched it actually, and then that was it. And she watched on the way back. But yeah, so Susan Sarandon is basically canceled. It's kind of quiet. She went up against the Jews and lost. Never a good move. And I mean, do I have to say it? You're in Hollywood.
Right.
You got to know where your bread is buttered. Come on. I mean,
Right.
it's statistics here. I'm not saying it's right, even though I do think there were a lot of left wing. I mean, if anything, I became more sympathetic to Israel and I shouldn't say the Jews, to Israelis
Right.
and that position after October 7th. And I think a lot of them woke up and saw the insanity of the progressive left.
Right.
And it turned a lot of people off. And I do want to look at eventually, because I love, this is what I like about politics. Like, it shows what people, like, what Americans think, where they stand on things. It's very interesting. I don't know. I think Trump won. I think I just saw something for New York City Jews, but I think he won like the highest percentage he ever had.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure what the split is, but Jews are actually one of the most reliably Democrat voting blocks in America. I think more than Muslims, actually. Muslims actually used to vote Republican really until after the Bush election, where I think Bush won like a majority of Muslims or something in the first election. Obviously not the second one, but the first one. And that changed. And I saw some stats that I've been debunked or whatever, I think. But they were saying like Jill Stein won the most Muslims, but then someone was saying that it's not true, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go into that stuff, but I am interested in seeing what the breakdowns are, because it's weird. It's like Trump kind of benefited from both.
Right.
Like, you would think that one would swing one way and one or the other.
Right.
I think most people say Trump did win Muslims outright and did like the best of Republicans ever done with Jews, maybe ever.
Yeah,
so, which is really, it kind of sucks for Kamala, but it's really, I mean, I love it.
Yeah, it does crack me up that Kamala won everybody except the electorate. So
well,
straight white men came out for her. So
they had that breakdown. The Democrats' bread and butter is now unmarried, educated women. If you want to go down, and again, if you're going to pick men or women for your voting block, you actually want women. They vote more, they're more civically engaged. That's just statistics.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go education, America, I think we peaked with education. I think our generation was the pinnacle of educational attainment, where it's just education for education's sake. And even then, I think 40% or less of Americans have advanced degrees. And I think it's going to get lower. Gen Z is the quote unquote tool belt generation, right? I think less Gen Z, rightfully so, are not just going to college to go to college. It's not worth it. There are
they watched a bunch of Charlie Kirk videos saying go to trade school. So.
Honestly, for some people, it's true. My school, where I went, pushed college so much, and I had lots of friends who just like weren't cut out for college, and that's not a knock.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's a blessing. You don't take on a lot of debt. You start making money right away. I mean, it depends what you're good at. If you want to be a doctor, you want to be an architect, you have to go to college. If you want to just make money, you're good with cars, you're good with your hands, you want to work in a restaurant, why go to college? You're going to go spend a bunch of money, probably not even get the degree, which is the worst thing you can do, and then I end up there anyway. And I saw a lot of people do that. I played football with a lot of guys who just went to college to play football, and they couldn't hack it, and it just wasn't for them. And then they just ended up working. And it's like, well, you spent 2 years at this private liberal arts college, and you have nothing to show for it. And again, I'm not saying that's all their fault, because it gets pushed on us. Our generation is just go to college, go to the most expensive college. Doesn't matter. It'll be worth it. Doesn't matter. It's just not fucking true.
Yeah. Real quick, did you ever see Tommy Boy? With,
of course,
Chris Farley and
many times
David Spade. You remember that part when Chris Farley he finally graduated from college, and then so he meets David Spade's character, and he's picking him up at the airport, and he goes, "Hey, congratulations on graduating in just a shade under a decade." And then Chris Farley goes, "Well, lots of people go to college for 8 years," and then David Spade goes, "Yeah, they're called doctors."
Exactly. Don't get me wrong, college rules. I love that I went to college. I'm someone who should have gone to college. But I think if you're gonna bet on education versus not education, and I think this was the first election where the Democrats won like the highest quintile or whatever, or quarter or whatever of incomes, and Republicans actually won the lowest, which is it's usually the reverse.
Yeah.
And if you have more people who are not going, and it's educational attainment, if you have more not going to college, like the Republicans are just in the better seat. I think downstream there's some issues with that. The more educated people tend to be more civically minded, so they vote. And that's where Republicans used to have the upper hand. Was everyone focused on general election, but Republicans would show up in midterms, they would show up in special elections, they would win these state houses, and I think so you do want that educational base for those reasons.
Yeah.
But it looks like the Democrats are just slipping a lot with what used to be their base. Now it's basically just turning into overeducated
white ladies.
Like, yes, honestly, like overeducated white ladies.
Yep. Well, anyway, so getting back to this thing of how, the left is always eating itself, going after Susan Sarandon. And so I just want to read a little bit more from this article. Sarandon is not alone. Another actress, Melissa Barrera, was dropped from the cast of Scream 7 for sharing posts on social media that accused Israel of genocide, while a prominent agent at Creative Artists Agency was demoted but kept her job, according to Variety, after her client, Tom Cruise, indicated that she had his support. There are so many people out of work right now since last November who have lost their jobs as custodians, as writers, as painters, as people working in the cafeteria, substitute teachers who have been fired because they tweeted something or liked to tweet or asked for a ceasefire, Sarandon says. Yeah, I mean, it is funny that
it's one of those things where it's like, where the fuck were you guys when this was us? Like, this was our side being attacked for liking tweets, retweeting things, basically political opinions. And a lot of ours didn't concern like dead Jews.
Right.
Like, yeah. And like some of this shit was really gross. I don't support it. Like, was it Melissa Barrera? Barrera? She's just annoying in general. She's just one of those, hyper identity politics. So I don't want to defend her, but I also don't think you should be losing your job over, bringing attention to violence.
Right.
I don't know when that happened. What was insane was when people were like, the Harvard group or whatever, basically blaming Israel for everything. It's like, you have no tact. You have no, like people just brutally slaughtered and kidnapped. And you're saying like, this is all Israel's fault. Like those people I have no sympathy for. So I don't know if she's one of them. And I don't like, these aren't all equivalents and shouldn't just be like, well, now where are you defending us? Like, no, there are degrees to this. Yeah. But it does kind of suck. They do seem like they're blackballed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, there was a few years back, there was that college professor who was a white man, and he was giving like a linguistics lecture on Chinese. There's a filler word in Chinese that sounds like the N word, and he says it. It doesn't say the N word. He sounds the word that sounds like the N word, but it's like the most bland, straightforward lecture, and he was suspended because like a couple of college students complained. So it's like, where, and it was a pretty high profile case. Like, where was Hollywood? Say, hey, whoa, he's just giving a lecture. Like, he's not calling a black student the N word. Like, he's, where we're progressives during that.
Also, Melissa Barrera, I'm looking at her filmography. I saw one of her movies this year. She's in Abigail, the vampire movie. She's in 3 movies this year. So no, she's not even like fucking canceled. Yeah. Like I don't. So I have even less sympathy. Susan Sarandon, though, seems more. I think.
Well, she's an old woman, and Hollywood doesn't like old ladies. So
that's true, but she's also like very. She's also very well known, but I think it's the combo of, well, this was a bridge too far. Like, you didn't vote, you didn't support the person we wanted to win. You let this monster Trump come into power. Again, she had nothing. This is not her fault at all. None of this. Like, no one's entitled to your vote. But and now you're also. It seems like it's just very convenient. Like, she wrote this again, very dumb, very tone deaf tweet. I think it was a tweet. Or no, she's speaking off the cuff, she said, at a protest. Yeah. Okay. But still, like, again, I very much disagree with it. But at the same time, I don't know. It doesn't seem right. So they say that basically they say she's doing like this low budget comedy, which honestly looks pretty funny. I don't know. Did you watch the trailer?
I didn't see the trailer. No,
It actually looks funny. It's like a black bowler, and there's a lot of like, I don't know. I was surprised. I thought this would be trash.
Yeah.
Apparently, when he gets paid, he wants the N word written really big on the checks, like big checks or something, like shit like that. I'm like, this is funny.
Okay, all right. Looks pretty outrageous.
He has like a lot of sexual jokes, and she's like she plays like a competitor who's a real like hard ass trash talking, and he's like super attracted to her. She's a very pretty woman.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just think it looks, it's about a young black man named Walt who discovers by accident that he is a fabulously gifted bowler. He gives himself a bowling name featuring the N-word and insists that it's written on the large checks that he's given for winning tournaments. Like, that's funny.
Yeah.
And I would watch this movie.
Yeah.
How old is she? Oh yeah, and she has a great line. It's like, she's talking trash about him. She's like, Walt could be something someday, like a garbage man or janitor in Wakanda. Like, that's good.
Yeah.
That's funny shit. That's not something. That's only something you're gonna see in like a low budget comedy.
Yeah.
So good for her.
Yeah. Seriously. Cool. All right. So should we talk censorship in the arts?
We shall. We do that. It's one of our go-tos here.
Yeah. So this is an article in Art News. This came out recently. Amid an uptick in censorship, a national coalition is helping artists fight back. The artist Xandra Ibarra was caught off guard by a text she received in February 2020. It was a message from a curator she was working with on a group exhibition opening that week at the city of San Antonio's Centro de Artes Gallery. They were informing her that her video in the show had been removed. The 4-minute piece called Spectacle to La Tortilla Directa shows Ibarra performing La Chica Boom, her burlesque stage persona, a minstrelsy of Chicanx, gender and racial stereotypes. The piece culminates with the artist strapping a Tapatio bottle to her groin and ejaculating the hot sauce onto tortillas. Raunchy by design, the video is a gripping commentary on sexual and racist tropes and racial tropes. First off, I doubt it's gripping in any real way. Like,
this is just like so fucking typical 2020 quote unquote art. Like, it's so typical. Chicanx. By the way, I like the way you say tapatio. That's spicy. And then raunchy, gripping commentary on sexual and racial. What's the commentary? Is commentary the same thing that everyone's been saying for 40 fucking years? Is that the commentary?
Yeah, probably. And also, there's nothing like what do you call it? There's nothing subtle about it. It's not like it's kind of questioning certain things and kind of leaves it up to the interpretation of the audience. It's like, no, she's jacking off with tapatio hot sauce.
Has anyone mildly attractive ever done burlesque?
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of that, haven't you?
Yeah, but it's funny, even then
in your work.
Yeah, and even then, most of them are not that great.
I wouldn't think so.
They're not that great looking. There are a lot of where it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of body positivity crap, which you know what that means. Let's be real here.
These more negativity.
Yeah. But anyway, obviously, this type of art is probably not going to be like our, what we'd consider to be like actual art. But I'm more fascinated by the sort of the censorship aspects of it, though. The basic elements of the story, though, is that this artist had everything been approved for this gallery in San Antonio, and was at the last minute. The video ended up on the desk of City Attorney Andy Segovia. Ibarra told me over Zoom. Segovia wrote a statement claiming my video was violating Texas penal codes, and he deemed it obscene. This expulsion of an artwork from a small provincial art space might have gone unnoticed had it not reached the ears of the National Coalition Against Censorship's Arts and Culture Advocacy Program. And you and I we were talking about this. Like we had never heard of them. So this is kind of interesting. They penned a public letter to the mayor of San Antonio, pressuring him to restore the work to the exhibition. The letter argued that city-owned spaces are ruled by the free speech clause in the First Amendment, and concluded that this means government officials cannot arbitrarily or systematically impose their prejudices on a curated exhibition. So long story short, it ended up being reapproved, but then COVID happened. So then it ended up not happening. So,
Right.
yeah. So what do you make of this part so far, Mr. Legal Boy?
Well, I mean, the obscenity test, they talk about the Miller test in here somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That there's a flashback. I think we talked about this in like episode 1.
Yeah. I think we brought it up a few
Right.
times. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure this was like episode 1 or a very, very early episode. But
Yep.
the Miller test was created by the Supreme Court to assess whether speech or expression can be deemed obscene and therefore suppressed. But again, it's only from the government, and then it's been like interpreted in different ways, whether that's federal or state. I don't know where, like, obviously I don't know where this would go. I haven't seen it, or like, I don't know who would bring the cause of action. Again, I just don't know. And they talk about, well, is this what kind of venue is this? Is this a state venue?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little squirrely, I think.
And again, it looks like the COVID just like kneecapped it anyway.
Right.
So I don't know if did it come back up. Well, it said it was reinstated, but then COVID just made it obsolete, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I've never actually practiced any like obscenity law. It's not something that we do. That's like a very technical and particular area of law that like the ACLU would deal with, which they talk about here, or fire now probably just as much. So unless you're like a free speech attorney or First Amendment attorney.
But it's funny because like, this article, even though it's obviously criticizing censorship, it still has a pretty progressive bent. And so like, I'll point that out here.
Sure.
Censorship is the program's #1 target. While legally in the U.S., censorship refers to the suppression of art by a federal or state actor because of its content. Mincheva contends that their work requires a more expansive view of the offense. The San Antonio art space that restricted Ibarra is state funded, so that was that case was more clear cut. But most museums and commercial galleries in the country are privately supported, and legally they can determine what happens within their walls. A lot of people don't see it as censorship when it comes from their side. Mincheva explains, it's seen as the right thing to do. In the U.S., censorship is often framed as something nefarious that happens in China or Russia. But here, bans on books, abortion, and critical race theory from the right, and so-called cancel culture on the left, mean that with some regularity, artists' works are being removed from public view.
Yeah, it's like way more coming from the left, and I hate that it's framed this way, and I hate this whole like ban books thing. Where sure there are some districts that ban things like Harry Potter or for witchcraft and that sort of thing, which is comical nowadays. I don't know how often that happens anymore. It probably does, but a lot of the stuff that gets banned, like the banned books that the progressives love to discuss, is like pornography. It's like showing tweens how to give a blowjob. It's like that sort of thing, which that shouldn't be in school anyway. That's not like that. That's just pornographic. That's and they never taught. They always focus on like they never focus on, for instance, districts like from a progressive bent banning Huckleberry Finn, which used to be banned probably from the right more because it had like a white boy and a black man being friends, and now it's being banned from the left because of the N-word.
Or even worse, like To Kill a Mockingbird for the same reason.
Yes,
which is
exactly.
A genuinely anti-racist book. Like
exactly, like one of the books that got a generation of boomers to consider civil rights, and now it's being banned because I still don't really. It's like because of the language.
Yeah, because of the N-word, just because it mentions it. But it's like that's a good like lesson to teach children about like the importance. Like this is not a word that you should be
bizarre. And it was banned recently in like districts, I think in Oregon or Washington or one of those psycho states out there.
Right.
And like that, like they never focus on that when they're talking about the book bans. They focus on like genderqueer and that sort of shit. And it's like, no, these are like disgusting books that are just like showing sexual acts to middle schoolers instead of like, what about the side who's banning classics because you don't like the language, which a lot of times that is the point of the subject matter of the book. It's like, yeah, the guys who are using the N-words, they're the bad guys.
Yes.
Like they're that's the point.
Yeah.
The white people who kill Tom, was Tom, right? And To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
They're the bad guys. Yes. How else do we need to spell it out?
Right.
Man. So it's just bizarre. Like these shouldn't even be equal. And the other part, like the critical race theory thing, is like, no, a lot of that isn't banned for its subject matter necessarily. It's banned because it's like you can't treat, under the 14th Amendment, you can't treat groups of people differently based on immutable characteristics like race. Right. And that's what teachers were doing to children. Yes. They were separating them by race, which is illegal. Right. And that's why these books are banned, and why, yes, do right-wing states sometimes go too far? Absolutely. And then they get struck down because it's a constant polarization, push and pull. Yes. And if the left goes too far, what's going to happen is the right is then going to respond and go too far. And then the left is going to do this, and it's going to go back and forth, and the pendulum is going to swing. Yep. And I understand why either side, being objective here, why either side does that, because it's like you push 10 yards, you give up 8. It's like, well, we still moved 2 yards from where we were. And then you do it again, and it goes back and forth until, some real changes happen. The public becomes so, basically your views get pushed out of the Overton window, which I think is happening with a lot on the left. I do think things like abolish the police and a lot of critical race theory things, and a lot of this stuff is getting pushed out of the Overton window. Although she's a complete fake and phony, Kamala Harris did run a centrist anti-identitarian campaign. Yeah. For the most part, she did not do the Hillary Clinton glass ceiling thing. It wasn't about her being the first woman, whatever. Right. The Republicans brought up race way more than she did. And even though I think she's a phony and she was the exact opposite in 2019, 2020, it was like, that wasn't even, they fucking campaigned with the Cheneys. Yeah. So I think that stuff is looked at as such a loser, that if you had not just the first Black Indian woman president, period, let alone you have them talking about, and I'm glad that these things haunted her. The ad I saw the most, one of the most from the Republicans, from Trump, was it was a really good tagline. It's like, when she filled out ACLU questionnaire about, would you give free trans surgeries to inmates? So it's like, you have illegal people who committed crimes. Would you give them taxpayer funded surgery? She said yes. She filled it out. It's in writing. It's not a lie that she filled that out, because she was trying to be as progressive as possible. And Trump's tagline wasn't, did you see this? Where it's like, she's for they, them, he's for you. I was like, that's a great line. That's a great line. Yeah. And that's the kind of basically critical race theory shit that the right's trying to ban, which again is, a lot of it is illegal under the Constitution. Right. You can't separate, you can't treat people differently in these settings based on those characteristics. So
yeah, and so I actually I just saw a clip. So Rainn Wilson, who's most famous for playing Dwight in The Office, he's got a podcast, and he had Bryan Cranston on, and they were both very progressive dudes, and they were discussing, the critical race theory and why America needs to teach America's history, its racist history more. And here's the thing, I'm not even necessarily against that. I'm sure that there are many important events that just don't get covered enough in American history courses. However, what I hate about the left's defense of why we should be teaching critical race theory and teaching America's racist past, is that they are so obsessed with only teaching things that will upset conservatives. They will but they hide behind this thing of like, well, we're trying to be objective about America's history. It's like, no, you're not. You're only so actually. I just learned this recently. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I've stumbled upon this thing. There were freed Black slaves in the U.S. who became slave owners themselves, who owned other Black slaves. So I was like, okay, progressives, do you want to teach that as well? Because that's a pretty uncomfortable thing. That's
dude. What's her name? I somehow I always bring up New Orleans every episode. Do you know Marie Laveau? You ever heard of her?
I don't think so.
She's a very famous voodoo priestess in New Orleans. She's buried in St. Louis Cemetery #1. If you watch the American Horror Story season about witches and voodoo priestesses in New Orleans, she's played by Angela Bassett, and she owned slaves. This woman, and when last time I was there, it was 2 years ago. First time I've been back since I lived there, and I stayed in a hotel where there's a big portrait of her behind the lobby. Right, it's in the It was in the French Quarter. It's a block or two off of the Treme, which is the Treme is significant because it's the neighborhood right behind the French Quarter in New Orleans. It's known for being the first neighborhood in America that was like for freed blacks, like in the South, maybe it's like, but in a slave state, in a heavy, like New Orleans was the port of slavery in the South in America. It was like the biggest port for a while, and there were freed blacks there, and some of them owned slaves. But that's the reality of it. In fact, I had a professor in law school, and he was black, by the way, who would talk about how, and again, I'm not saying I agree with this, and I think it's more nuanced, but he would talk about, almost to get a rise out of people, he'd say like how the slaves were treated better than like free white laborers because the slaves were property. And people gave a shit about protecting their property. Again, I don't agree with that.
It's a very reductive thing for sure.
You want to find some like silver lining, fine, but like that was a point he was trying to make, and this was for property law, by the way. There's a property law class. So we talk like the Irish, the Italians went down there. They didn't give a shit. They like worked beside the blacks because they didn't understand American racial politics, and they would just work with them because they didn't care. They were like, "What's wrong with working with black people? Like, we don't care." So they worked a lot of the same jobs. And that's where they got like the term guineas and things like that, because they kind of had the hair my dad has that kind of hair where it's like more, it can kind of like grown to an afro. Not the exact same, but similar. And some of them are dark. Like my dad has that like olive skin. He's like darker. Because Southern Italian. I got all the German shit. I have the light eyes and the light skin and the light hair. The British shit. But I forgot how I got on this, but yes, teaching this stuff. It's like, and also I'll say this, I've said this on this pod many times. I don't know where people get this idea, because this was not my experience growing up, in the 2000s, even the late 90s. Like, we constantly learned this shit. We constantly, it was beaten into us that like white people bad, indigenous, they use indigenous, and he's like Native American this, black that. Like, we learned about the internment camps, we learned about the Chinese Exclusion Act, we learned obviously about slavery, about all of this stuff, like nonstop. So when you have people saying like we don't teach it, like, don't teach it where? I'm shocked, because even in like red states, the public school teachers, I would think, are still majority, if not overwhelmingly, like liberal Democrats. I don't know the stats on that. Maybe you could prove me wrong, but definitely in blue states. Like basically public school teachers are skew left by a lot. I think skew left to the median of their state. You and I grew up in blue states. And I can't imagine that. Okay, like in Texas, they're just not teaching that slavery was bad. Like, maybe I did see some things, like maybe it was kind of glossed over, but we learned about lynchings. We learned about like everything, and that it was evil. And it never was like it never even was a conversation. There was no nuance for it. I'm not saying there should be for some of these issues. But it was never like, oh, I got to college and all of a sudden I'm like, what? There were minorities were treated poorly at one point in this country. What are you talking about?
Exactly. Well, it's like getting back to this thing of like teaching uncomfortable history. It's like, okay, progressives, some of the first elected black politicians were Republicans. Like the very first like black senator, the very first like black senator was Republican. The very first black Speaker of the House was Republican. So it's like, you want to teach that? You want to celebrate one aspect of it, but not the other. So it's all about nuance and objectivity. We got to teach everything. So
back when it was like, the era of renaming everything and tearing down statues, I'd go to the city. My wife was living there at the time, and we'd go to Harlem sometime. And what's one of the main boulevards in Harlem? Adam Clayton Powell. He was, I think, the first, I forget, he's the first something congressman in New York who was black. Maybe he basically represented Harlem, right?
Right.
Adam Clayton Powell was a huge homophobe,
Mm.
ruined Bayard Rustin's life. And I coincidentally have a note here that just says Rustin on it. That's because I have to add some stuff, and I'm that far back. You know, this was from last year, but the movie about Bayard Rustin came out. Do you even know who that is?
I don't think so.
No, because a lot of people don't know him because he was basically erased from the civil rights movement because he was a gay black man. And they didn't want, because they wanted all of the civil, like, you know, there was a conservatism to some of these things to make it more palatable. It's kind of like gay marriage was being, I think, very smartly marketed as, you know, we want to be just like you. We want to own homes. We want to get dental insurance and the stock market and raise families and yada, 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 right? All that shit. Like, we're just like you. And there was some of that in the civil, like, we can't have openly gay people or people where I think he was arrested. This is how much this has changed. She was arrested for sex acts in California, of all places, back in the 50s. I think it was San Francisco. Right. Wild, you know, how that's changed. Now it would be like that you would get a, you know, you could do it on stage in the museum there or something.
Exactly.
Like now it would be,
you get a statue for doing it.
Yeah. In the act, in like in flagrante, you could just this is the Museum of Oral Sex.
Exactly.
So anyway, Bayard Rustin was a huge. He was especially, I think, known for, he kind of mastermind, I believe, the Million Man March. Again, I might be wrong with some of the stuff, but he was gay, and it was like an open secret because you couldn't be openly gay back then, but it was like an open secret. Adam Clayton Powell ruined this man's life, like ruined his fucking life. And this was a hero of the civil rights movement. Why aren't we changing that?
Exactly.
Boulevard, Adam Clayton Powell. Why aren't we teaching that?
Right.
And actually, I would argue that the most, some of the, you know, if you look at a map of the world where, I'm kind of drifting here, but like, homosexuals, gay people, actually any minorities, pretty much you have the best in majority white liberal countries. It's in Africa, in the Middle East, and the Caribbean, where gay people are put to death, are persecuted, it's like, well, I mean, so why isn't that taught? Why isn't it taught that like Jamaica and Uganda and Saudi Arabia and like these are the worst countries where, and I tell this openly to the liberals in my life. I say, you know, it's ironic to me that you have these progressive values, and yet you're the most open having people come here who are the anathema to these progressive values, who actually are very conservative, not even so conservative that like are not even welcome here, that are beyond reproach or whatever, outside the Overton window of what you believe should even be discussed in American politics, and you want them to come here en masse. Like it's not going to work out for you. And I think a lot of liberals realize that this election, where it's like, well, you have these Muslims and conservative Latinos who kind of just voted Democrat for a year. I think the Muslims table them because I think this is particular to this election, but you know, a lot of these people who come from very conservative backgrounds just kind of voted Democrat because that's what you did, even though they were more conservative Democrats. And now all of a sudden you're surprised when they start voting Republican. When they've been conservative all along. People just don't identify with parties nearly as much as they used to, and also Democrats just kind of suck now and have strayed so far from what they used to be even 20 years ago. Anyway, so getting back to your point, yes, there's always they're always hypocritical about this. They don't teach the full extent. Like, okay, Columbus bad, right? That's the one they always teach. What about the indigenous who were tearing the hearts out of people on giant pyramids and tossing their heads down the steps, right? Like, how about they were good? Like, how about how the Comanche would rape and cut the genitals off of their, you know, the Apaches and burn them alive? Like, you know, we have this idea that the natives were just like picking berries and having sex and everything. It's like, no, they were warriors. That's where warrior comes from. They had weapons. They had entire clans. They went to war with each other for fucking hundreds, thousands of years. Right. Well, you know, Europeans were just better at it. Like that.
Because I'm from California, and so there were a lot of Catholic missions that were set up here, and it's like, you know, it's such a progressive talking point where it's like, you know, white people and Judeo-Christians, you know, persecuted, you know, the indigenous. So but you know, at the same time, like, especially in the Bay Area, it's like so many cities like, I'm from San Jose, and then I moved to Santa
Yeah.
Clara, and then there's San Francisco to the like. So many of these cities have saints names, and so it's like we would not be here if love it or hate it. But we would not be here if we did not have these Catholic missions here that were setting up and built towns which evolved into cities here. So I don't know what to tell you. Like, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. So
don't get me wrong. I think some like every Columbus Day, the memes come out, and I like some of them. They're funny. It's like the big Chad with the Spanish helmet on, and like, the crying. It's like the human sacrifices will stop. It's like that. Yeah. Like, I think some of them are simplistic. Some of the Catholics were, and Columbus was a bastard. Like, he was a bad dude for the time also. I don't think he was uniquely bad. I don't think the Spanish were not great, especially by today's standards, but people were just shitty. Like, the societies were shittier. Everyone was shittier. Like, people just died more and tortured more and raped and all of those things. And everyone did it did it a lot. And the indigenous were no different. I didn't have the same kind of tools. They couldn't mechanize it like that way. But like, Africa had slaves. The largest slave trade was the Sub-Saharan slave trade. The Muslims were, and the Arabs were enslaving the Black Africans. The indigenous people had slaves. Indigenous Aztecs and Mayas and Incas, they had giant cities that the people they had who do you think built those pyramids? Right. Do you think it was unionized labor? No. We're getting a fair wage. No, it was slavery. It was mass slavery that built all that shit. Yep. So anyway, what were we talking about?
Well, we're talking about like censorship and how it's shown up, but how it tends to come from like both sides, and the
both sides is. I'm sorry, I think it's like a lot of bullshit. I think maybe the pendulum has swung more to the right, and there is right-wing censorship. It's not even close to what it used to be, and I still don't think it's like on the same. Like, yes, I will speak up against it. Yeah. Some of it does go too far. A lot of it is also just like liberals being like the "Don't Say Gay" bill, for instance, in Florida. Like, that's not what it is.
Right. Exactly.
But, like, is it a perfect bill? No. Will some of it get struck down? Yes. I think some of it already has. Yep. But like, that's not what it is. It's not. You can't say gay. It's about like not like teachers. I think like openly talking about sex and like what can be taught, and it doesn't mean like you pretend gay people don't exist. That's not what it was,
right?
Or is. So, and I know there have been like Idaho, I think, had a bad bill, that's crammed through by the Republicans there. Yep. So yeah, that's always going to happen. But I think more culturally, like culture is still so liberal, so left wing. Yeah. They're the ones stopping way more. Like, you can put on like artists, museums, they look for this shit. They want the transgressive stuff. Like, I'm sorry, it's not like you're not fighting against anyone now. Like, if anything, if you're a certain identity, you get benefits to that. Like, they want your commentary on race relations or whatever. It's not interesting anymore because it used to be transgressive to like the stodgy museum types, and you'd have to go to like the West Village or whatever. You'd have to go to the Lower East Side or San Francisco, created that progressive. And there was a time for that where it was great that, you could have people from middle America or even the conservative families in California go to these cities and gravitate there, and they felt different and they can be themselves. But like nowadays, that's a lot of that is just so mainstream.
Yeah.
Like, no one's censoring it.
Right. So yeah, that's the current state of America right now.
Yeah, I'll follow them. Again, like this article, it looked like it was going to be somewhat objective, but it just kind of turned into the usual. Like you said, it's like the so-called cancel culture. Like, there's not like are you really saying that people didn't lose their jobs and their livelihoods and like really like there's really people out there who believe that didn't happen? That's absurd.
Yeah.
But like, those people shouldn't be taken seriously. I think that's why this article, I was just like, oh, this sounds like a cool group.
Yeah.
But they're not like Fire, where it truly is objective, where they will defend, a professor in this case, but then a student in that case, and even administration in that case, or whatever it is. But this group is just partisan, and they're like the ACLU. It was the same shit. You can't take them seriously.
Yeah, and so like I mentioned to you before, when I watched that documentary that was I think co-produced or co-sponsored by Fire, and so there was that one gal there was somebody there from Fire, and I overheard them. So somebody asked them, "Hey, so where are you guys setting up your next office?" And like, yeah, it's a toss up between California and Florida. So, but I like that. I like where it's like, which state is going too far?
Yeah.
They're trying to be as objective as possible and try to be strategic. Yeah. So that's the current state of America. I think as usual, we have our fingers on the pulse of everything.
We can keep track of them, but
yeah.
Oh wow, look at this. We won't talk about this now, but it says Italian police smash art forgery ring, Mark Rothko's Ukrainian flag, painting hammers. Oh, this looks interesting, but I'll check this out from now on. This might be cool.
Organization. All right, everybody.
All right.
Stay reckless.
Fight the crits. Oh yeah, I won't be on for a few weeks. So hold down the fort, Joe. Guide the ship.
This will the show I think will reach new heights without you. So don't worry, Ben.
Yeah, no. So everyone, please don't just tune out because I won't be here. Still checking on Joe. Make sure he's doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're gonna be in Italy.
I'm going to be in Italy. I'll be looking at a lot of art. I'll be like, oh, art. Oh, more art. I'm very excited, though. I'm very excited. A lot of great museums on the list. And
be sure to have some Italian food while you're there, because I heard they make the best.
Yeah. Oh, we'll see. I'm from New Jersey, so there's some good.
I've been to Olive Garden, so I've got pretty high standards. So
yeah.
That unlimited breadstick. All right. Everybody stay reckless and fight the crits and stay reckless.